Heat check. Basketball, basketball, college. Basketball, basketball, college. Oh, is that time already? Whoa. Basketball.
Welcome into the Heat Check Hangout. You're tuning in to our conference tournament and breakdowns. We're priming you for all the conference tournaments going on this week, bringing in a couple different guests. And today, for the first time on the Hangout, we have Rocco Miller. How you doing today, Rocco?
Fantastic. It's great to be with you guys.
For those that don't know, Rocco's based out west. He's one of the best bracketologists you'll find out there. He does a show for Field of 68 called Fielding the 68. He works pretty closely along with our colleague Lucas to make sure y'all are all tuned in on what to look at for the different cut lines, who's on what seed line, last team's in, first team's out, all that stuff. Rocco's got you covered. So we're excited to talk a little Pac-12 hoops today. So looking at this bracket, it starts on Wednesday, March 8th. Tips off at 12 p.m. local time, Pacific Coast. Tips off at 3 p.m. Eastern. And the top four seeds that get a bye, we have UCLA, Arizona, USC, and Oregon. So looking over this bracket, fellas, is there anything in particular that stands out to you? Like anybody with a particularly tough draw, anybody with a particularly easy draw?
I think USC, for me, has the toughest draw of the top four seeds. I would much rather face a Washington State than Arizona State, given what Arizona State can do in games, right? Arizona State nearly beat USC at USC to end the season. They also beat Arizona on that last second shot. So I like Oregon's draw. I think Washington State's a really good team, and they have some really good shooters. But when you're looking at the draws that each of these teams gets, USC having to go through Arizona State, probably Arizona, and then likely UCLA in the championship game. It's a much tougher draw than Oregon has as the 4 seed, in my opinion, especially with a hobbled UCLA at the top end of the bracket.
How about you, Rocco? Would you add to that?
Of course. Yeah, I mean, definitely that last point with Jalen Clark's status unknown. You have to assume he's probably not going to play, but you never know. But he was on crutches yesterday and no weight on his foot. So we'll wait for a report on that. If one came out today, I'm sorry I didn't hear it. But I'm sure UCLA is doing their best to keep that information quiet. In terms of the draw, there's no bigger story in the tournament than Arizona State's path, based on the fact that they're very much on the cliff of the bubble. Whether you have them the very last team or the first team out, they're pretty much right there with everybody. So their final impression here will be important. They do play Wednesday against Oregon State, an Oregon State team that improved a little bit throughout the year. They have a couple good freshmen led by Jordan Pope. They're not entirely hopeless like a year ago. They actually beat USC a couple weeks ago, I think 3 weeks ago. So, again, you can't just look past the Beavers. And it's a game where the Beavers are probably somewhere around 200 in net last time I checked. If Arizona State loses that game, it's probably a TKO, and they're off to the NIT. So Sun Devils got to take care of the Wednesday night business, and they'll be in that very late game where most of the East Coast will be asleep. So they'll be waking up to that result. And then you'll get that same time when they get a chance to beat USC again. So a game that happened on Saturday, USC, that was a game where they had a comfortable lead. Arizona State stormed back in the last 2 minutes. DJ Horn had a hot look, pretty good look that he created with his dribble. It looked like it was going in, hit the rim, they lose by 3. So now it's a good for Arizona State because they can't really lose that much by losing again, and they can gain a lot by winning again as long as the committee takes it into account. So from that standpoint, Arizona State got a good draw because they need the opportunities. On the upper half, I agree. Oregon's got a great draw. They get the bye. I would also argue Washington State's got a really good draw because a game against Cal on Wednesday, on paper, they should win without sweating too much, and they should be fresh for the matchup with Oregon. Whoever comes out of that, it's maybe getting that hobbled UCLA scenario. But again, that's the Pac-12's best hope for a bid steal will be one of those two teams.
And I'm going to, look forward a little bit. I know we're not going winners, but Washington State is probably the best dart throw outside the top 4 seeds in almost any conference, in my opinion. I think they're the team that you're not going to necessarily look at as, they're not a Tennessee in the SEC, who's also outside the top 4 seeds in that conference. But they're one of those probably more underrated dark horses in any conference in the country.
Right, I would agree with that. Yeah, the Cougars come in with a 6-game winning streak in the last 3 in a row on the road. TJ Bamba has really exploded. He had 36 in the basketball version of the Apple Cup in Seattle. So Bamba, if you look at his last 6 or 7 games, he's just really become the leader and the alpha of the team. And, they played all their tougher games earlier in the year, and they did get a win in Arizona, which most people know about at Tucson. So that means their ceiling is potentially pretty high if they can find a way to close wins, which they've struggled with.
Yeah, I know Connor was saying before we started recording that he's pretty high on this Washington State team's chance to make a run. And Rocco, you mentioned TJ Bamba playing well. I know they have Muhammad Gay as well. But just looking at a team, it's out in Pullman. Yep. Maybe people tuned into them when they won in Tucson, but probably haven't paid a ton of attention to what's going on out there. What would you say is this team's identity that could maybe even benefit them in a tournament scenario like this?
Well, Kyle Smith's their head coach. He used to coach right here in San Francisco, of course, for years. So I've watched his teams for quite some time. He was an excellent coach at Columbia before San Francisco in the Ivy. But they're a balanced attack. You can look up their numbers. They're basically right around 60th in both offense and defense. I think defensively they've gotten a little bit stronger as the year has gone on, learning how to work in some of their different schemes and matchup combos. He likes to, much like a Todd Golden type of team, he likes to rely on the 3-point line, a 5-out approach, and really just find the open man and space the floor really, really well. And so, I think a lot of the country, if they're listening to this and saw San Francisco last year, it's so similar, it's almost the same, right? From an offensive standpoint. So learning how to use Guy effectively, both offense and his size defensively, has been key. DJ Rodman, Dennis Rodman's son, he's been a key player for them at 6'6", 215. Definitely a much more offensive-minded player than his father. And so, yeah, it's an interesting mix. You mentioned Tennessee there just a second ago. Justin Powell came in from Tennessee, another person that they rely on pretty heavily. He fires it from 3 at 41%. And so when these guys are humming, they're pretty dangerous. I didn't even mention Jabe Mullins, he was in the St. Mary's program for 2 years, a really solid recruit out of the Seattle area, so I'm pretty familiar with him. 4-star kid, really good get for St. Mary's. He ends up transferring to Wazoo over the off season, and the kid can really shoot as well. He's shooting near 42%. So they've got really good shooters across the board. They're 36th in the country in 3-point shooting, and that's what you want in a tournament setting where you got to wake up and play every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great points. And apologies to Muhammad Gee for mispronouncing his name. I'm blaming it on my East Coast bias. Throw it to my Southern accent a little bit. Maybe that's what tripped me up there. But Brian, I want to turn it to you and ask, as you look at this bracket, is there any potential matchup you're thinking like, man, I'm dying to see these two teams square off? That would sort of be a dream scenario for entertainment value?
Looking ahead to a potential final of a fully healthy UCLA, if we get that, in Arizona, I'm not going to turn down seeing that for a third time. But Arizona State USC, as we brought up earlier, that is a game that should be fun, should be up and down. Was both times they played this year. Arizona State has the NCAA tournament chances on the line, right? You win that, they're not in, but they're certainly in a much better position than they would be, going into that game. And there's a lot going on there. USC, I'll defer to Rocco to see if they're pretty safely in, but I don't think they're sweating or would be sweating as much as Arizona State on Selection Sunday. But obviously, winner of that game feels much better about their chances, should that game happen. Feels much better about their chances than they would in a loss. So that, to me, is the one that you're looking at the first 2 days, where the implications of it, I think, will ramp up the intensity more than some of the others.
Yeah, I think with
USC
USC
I would agree
in
with you,
particular.
Brian.
Oh, go ahead, Rocco.
Sorry about that. I was just going to agree on USC. I think they're about as safe as you can ask for based on a team that was just, on those last four buys scenario just a couple weeks back. They come in with 5 straight wins and really been handling their business. And even though none of the wins besides maybe yesterday were that amazing, and I'm sorry, they did lose to Arizona in between there, so they've won 5 of their last 6. But what I'm really getting at is they've gotten themselves in a safer ground. Their quadrant records are very they're well above 500. Like if you look at all 3 quadrants in the top, they're sitting there at 17 and 8. They're getting compared to teams that like Wisconsin and things like that aren't even 500. So even though they took a bad loss on opening night against Florida Gulf Coast and a second bad loss at the Beavers, that home win over UCLA, that road win and sweep over Arizona State, a win over Auburn, and they swept the mountain schools on the road really carries a lot of weight for their resume strength.
Yeah. What about you, Connor? Is there any particular matchup that you're looking forward to?
Yeah, it's that USC Arizona State matchup, and unfortunately, like you said, it's going to be that really late matchup that a lot of people aren't going to watch. But it's the matchup with the most. I mean, UCLA winning out and potentially getting the 1 seed is big, but that potential matchup between Arizona State and USC, I think, has more implications to it than UCLA's, because UCLA could potentially win out. And depending on what the committee does, not make it. It would require winning out from Houston and Purdue, etc. But I think that if Arizona State loses that game against USC, they're likely out. If they win that game against USC, they're probably in. So that one to me is the most important game. It's also probably going to be the closest game, or the most back and forth game we get in that round. So it's going to be a
USC to me is the most intriguing team, just with how they've been playing pretty well as of late. I know they kind of have the X factor of Vince Iwuchukwu. I know he didn't play on Saturday. Do y'all know why he missed that game or what his injury status is? He's just someone I know I'd seen recently, obviously the 5-star pedigree.
I'm not sure.
Well, I don't know what his status is for this upcoming game, but I like a lot of the pieces of this USC team. I really like Boogie Ellis is shooting a career best from 3-point percentage, and Drew Peterson has always been someone whose game I've loved, just having a 6'9", essentially a point guard out there who can make plays for others. But like you mentioned, Connor, they have a pretty tough draw that to me, this conference sort of feels like, with UCLA's injury concerns, that it is ripe for a dark horse pick to sneak up like that. But before we get into that a little bit, I mentioned Boogie Ellis, I mentioned Drew Peterson, but who are some other key players that you think will help determine who ends up winning this tournament? Maybe anybody who's under the radar a little bit, or maybe coming on strong late down the stretch of the season. Brian, you got anybody?
It's the backcourt for Arizona.
I was going to say
backcourt for Arizona, and
yes,
I can't
the
pick
Arizona
one,
backcourt,
right?
yes.
Kirk Risa, Courtney Ramey. It's just the backcourt. Whether that backcourt can play well or whether that backcourt struggles, and that's been the way Arizona goes, is that backcourt, because you know what Azuolas Tubelis is going to do. You know that Umar Ballo is going to be that big man in the middle who can, attack the rim off the ball and finish and play pretty solid defense. But if they can't get much from the backcourt, then I think they're ripe for an upset. Maybe not in the first game, but definitely against the winner of what we're presuming is going to be Arizona State USC.
Yeah.
How about you, Rocco? Is there any player
have to agree with that. I mentioned Bamba. I think if Wazoo does continue to stay hot, he's a big key to that from a scoring standpoint. Obviously, Guy and Rodman and others on the defensive end, which will be key to get stops in an event like the Pac-12 tournament where there's always a lot of offense. It's a great place to get hot, T-Mobile Arena, intimate setting. And, for anybody that's never been to that tournament, it's I've been going to it for 20-something years, not every year, but give or take, and been to a lot of great games there. Between Staples Center in LA, and then they moved about 8-9 years ago. You just get these amazing atmospheres where, especially since they've been to Vegas, where all of Tucson will drive up to Vegas. So it's a home court advantage big time for Arizona. Another sneaky one, if they make it far, or at least maybe if they make it to Thursday, is Colorado. Their fans are crazy, and they'll drive from Boulder to Vegas. So I don't know. I don't know if they have much of a shot against UCLA. They've been really inconsistent all year. I would not predict that.
Not without KJ Simpson.
Yeah, exactly. So that's just some Pac-12 tournament history for you. But I look at USC. Drew Peterson tried to play yesterday through back spasms. That's something to monitor. Obviously, Jalen Clark's injury. We've talked about how does that affect UCLA. On Oregon, I've noticed when Bartholomew plays well, they tend to really kind of glue better, even though he's not like the primary. And obviously when Will Richardson's going, they're a tough team to beat. So he's obviously key. So there's a lot. I mean, everybody's got somebody they really need to depend on. Cambridge for Arizona State, a guy that became famous for a 65-foot shot in Tucson. He didn't play that well this past week in L.A. So, and he's a very emotional player. And a team like that, Arizona State has a lot of wild swings throughout the year. You don't know which Sun Devil team you're going to get each week. But the good news there is if it's the good version and the crazy confident version, that's a team that could go far in this thing. So, yeah, there's so many to list. I think every team you could probably name one or two players. And I guess just from a dark horse standpoint, I thought Stanford really played well the last month. They didn't get a lot of wins. They beat the teams they were supposed to beat, but they were right there with the top of the league. They gave UCLA a scare. They hung with Arizona. They're coming from a 10 seeds position, but they're going to play a really cold Utah team who's lost at least 4 in a row. Maybe it's 5 in a row now coming into this tournament. So I do kind of expect – yeah, it's 5. Yeah, so yeah, I could easily see Stanford winning that first one, and then they have nothing to lose against Arizona. And that might be one of those situations. You see this in a lot of conference tournaments where you get that first game under your belt, you got your legs under you, you're feeling confident. And Arizona's coming in cold. Maybe they can at least, get a halftime lead and see where they go from there.
Jumping off that, Rocco, Stanford housed Arizona at Stanford a couple of weeks ago, and they did it with style play. They spaced the floor.
That's right.
Got a lot of guys on the perimeter, made Arizona's bigs defend, and they attacked the basket. They shot 64% or something ridiculous in that game. Made a lot of threes that I would not necessarily expect them to make continuously. But we've seen the last couple of weeks, and I wrote about this on Ralph Report that's up on heatcheckcbb.com, about how teams are starting to space Arizona that way, starting after that Stanford game. And Arizona's defense has struggled. So you beat that Utah team, you come in with that strategy that's worked against Arizona, I think you could potentially see that happen, and then Stanford starts to build some momentum. The other dark horse I'll throw out there is Washington State. We've seen what they can do. We've talked about it. They have the easier path if Jalen Clark's injury is a little bit more severe and UCLA struggles to replace his scoring. I think that's a scenario that sets up well for Washington State. So those are the two I'm watching, Washington State and Stanford.
Yeah, and good call on that Stanford win. I don't know how they did more than give them a battle. They beat them. So yeah, good call out on that. But I would argue because in early December the Pac-12 plays 2 games, and I was in Salt Lake City for the Utah win over Arizona. They beat them by 15. And Arizona, of course, was just a week removed from the Maui Championship, the Maui Invitational Championship. So maybe that had a little bit to do with it. But I also thought, to your point, and that was a great article that you wrote, Riley, that Utah really spaced them well, too. And I don't know if the blueprint was off the Utah game, the Stanford game, but obviously the overall point is that's an effective way to attack Arizona. And I think the key to beating Arizona or a team with the Gonzaga system, like Gonzaga themselves, is to have some sort of chess pieces around. And when you're around the perimeter, you don't have as much trouble getting back on defense, where Arizona just wants to go rim to rim as fast as they can. So you need to have some sort of attack on both ends to combat that.
Cool. Well, we will wind down our time today by just going around the horn and saying who we'll think will win this championship, and give a bold prediction too. Let's close with both. Give me your championship pick, bold prediction. Connor, you want to go first?
Yeah, I was going back and forth of my championship pick between Washington State and UCLA. Washington State would have been the bold prediction, but I'm going to go UCLA. My bold prediction is that Jalen Clark's replacement in the starting lineup, David Singleton, wins the tournament's most outstanding player. You look at the big games in Pac-12 play that UCLA has won, and And David Singleton has been a key part of that, especially from the perimeter, especially from a spacing perspective. He leads the team in effective field goal percentage, offensive rating, true shooting percentage. He's top 60 in the country in three-point shooting percentage. I think without Jalen Clark in there, he steps into that role, becomes somewhat of a sniper for them, and takes out everyone in their path. I've been on UCLA as the clear best team in this conference from the start of the season till now. And I just can't bring myself to pull off.
Rocco, how about you?
Yeah, so another tough decision. I think it starts and stops with UCLA for obvious reasons. And I think the priority at UCLA is to get to the Final Four and win the national championship. I don't think the priority, especially after they won this league by 4 games, is to win this tournament. However, they do know the number 1 seed is possibly on the line. I do think they have to get help with another Purdue loss in order to get there. And if Purdue loses late in that tournament, it's probably too late to get there anyway. You look at what happened last year. They did get to the final, but Arizona beat them. And like I said before, Arizona's just got such a huge advantage in this event. By Friday night, the whole arena is going to be red and blue. So, I think Arizona has I respect USC, I respect Arizona State, but I don't really foresee Arizona not getting to the championship. I could easily see UCLA just bowing out in the semis and getting ready for a big NCAA run. And because of that, I'll take Arizona.
I'm going to stick with UCLA. I think we see a bit of a breakout party from Amari Bailey, taking on more of the offensive role from Jalen Clark. My bold prediction, though, is that they beat Arizona State in the title game. Arizona State has always played better with its back kind of against the wall in the Bobby Hurley era. And I think a team with that level of irrational confidence, if they can get going against Oregon State, who will give them plenty of opportunity to get going, I think that could carry them past USC, and they have the personnel to space Arizona out in the way that Arizona has struggled with. That'd be a really fun game if we get that in the semis. So I think UCLA takes it, but Arizona State to me is the team that makes a run.
I'm also going to go with Arizona for the championship pick. I got to go against you, Ralph, on Arizona State getting there, just because I think there's no way that Arizona lets their rival get them again after that half-court shot.
That's why it's a bold prediction, Riley. That's why it's a bold prediction.
I got you. I mean, I know it definitely is bold, but I just don't see.
I'll tell you guys this. If you guys get the Territorial Cup on a late Friday night in Vegas, that's going to be one of the wildest arenas you'll see all year in college basketball.
That would be great.
I mean, you talk about a bunch of lubed up fans at 8:30 in Vegas. Oh my gosh! And they still got time to go to Hakkasan after the game.
East Coasters got to stay up for that one. Stay up a little late for that. It's Pac-12 after dark, baby. But I'll say Arizona gets by them.
They might throw tortillas on the court. Yeah.
But I just think Arizona's they're gonna relish a chance to try to end Arizona State's tournament hopes if Arizona State gets past USC. So then for my bold prediction, I'll say Washington State gets to the title game, and I think they're gonna get past a hobbled UCLA team in the semifinals behind like a 30-15 game from Mohamed Gee. He's gonna say one of those big performances. Like Rocco said, I think UCLA they got their sights set on bigger things after winning the regular season title. They're going to try to get ready for a run in March.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's been round 1 of our Heat Check CBB conference tournament previews. Tune in to the Pac-12 tournament tipping off on Wednesday, and that'll culminate on Saturday. As always, Riley Davis joined by my co-hosts Brian Ralph and Connor Hope. Special thank you to Rocco for being on the show with us, talking some hoops. Always a pleasure, man. And best of luck as you go back into your bracket bunker. I'm sure you'll be grinding out the rest of the week and trying to keep that top 5 spot on Bracket Matrix. We'll see if who wins that out between you and Lucas. So
it'll be fun, man. We always enjoy it. It's a great exercise.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Basketball, college. Basketball, college. Oh, is that time already? Whoa, basketball, college. Come on. Basketball, college. Whoa. Basketball, college. Whoa, basketball, college.